Hello from Beit and thank you for joining me in the study of Parashat Bereshit. We are starting a new book, Sefer Bereshit, with a new Parashat Bereshit. And today I would like to discuss ruler or a leader. What is really our role, our responsibility to nature? When God created us, did He create us to be the leaders of the world, the universe, all the other creatures? Or do we need to try to walk hand in hand with them? What is our responsibility as the leaders of creation? So the Torah in Bereshit, in Genesis, Perek Aleph, the first chapter, verse 26 says, Vayomer Elokim, and God says, Na'aseh Adam betzalmeinu kidmuteinu. And God says, let us make, which obviously creates theological issues, a human being in our image, וירדו בדגת הים ובעוף השמיים, and they will rule the fish in the sea and the birds in heaven, ובבהמה ובכל הארץ, and with the beasts and the animals, ובכל הרמס הרומס על הארץ, which means, in a way, Hashem commended Adam. He had in mind that when He will create human beings, when He will create Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, they will be basically ירדו בדגת הים. What does it mean, ירדו? That's going to be our discussion for the next few minutes. But really, when we try to understand it literally, Yirdu means that they will rule. They will be the rulers, they will be the leaders of the universe. But what does it mean? So, Radak suggested the following in his commentary. ויאמר אלוקים נעשה אדם. בשערי ברואי מטה, אמר תדשי הארץ, ישרצו המים, תוצא הארץ, which means, when God created any other creature or any other item in the 6 days of creation, in a way God commanded, and He says, let the earth bring trees and flowers, may the water bring fish, and that's it. וכשבא לברוא את האדם, but He came to create human beings, שהוא המורכב באחרות, because we are so complicated. We have components of earthly components, and we have obviously heavenly components. אמר נעשה אדם, we will make a human being. ולמעלת האדם ולכבודו, בראו באחרונה, which means, and because of the dignity and the high level and the high expectations that God has from us, from human beings, He created us last, להודיע שכל נבראי מטה נבראו בעבורו. It's come to teach us, says the Radak, that everything was created for us. That's why we came at last. We came last to the party, because we needed to make sure that everything is ready. The food is ready, the tables are ready, the decorations are ready, the music is ready. We just need to come now into the party. ושמוהו אדון על כולם. And God appointed us to be a master, the master for all the other creatures. So it seems to be that according to Radak, the opening statement of the creation of Adam and Eve was the idea that God, who is the ultimate king, appointed in a way a king on earth, which is really us, Adam and then Chava and humanity, to basically rule in order to lead the other creatures and to be Adon, to be a master on them. And what does it mean, וירדו בדגת הים? And they will rule the fish and the beasts and the animals. להודיע כי כל נבראי מטה לא נבראו אלא בעבור האדם. ושיהיה הוא בשכלו מלך ומושל עליהם. Now, Radak says it's in order to teach us and to let everyone know, to all the other creatures, that they were created in order to serve us, which obviously can be a bit dangerous. What does it mean? Can we abuse nature only for our own pleasures and desires? Says Radak, ושיהו בשכלו מלך ומושל עליהם. One of the major differences between us and other creatures is that we have highly developed cognitive abilities. In a way, God entrusted us because of the gift that He gave us, because of our cognitive abilities, to lead humanity and to lead the universe into what, says Radak, שאם לא כן, לא היה בעולם השפל מי שיכיר מי בראו. Which means God created this world, and He created the world in many different reasons why God created this world. This is, by the way, should be probably a different class. Why God created this world, this universe. But let's say after God decided He created this universe, He decided that we need to testify that God exists. And who can do it better than us, people who had the divine gift, which is our cognitive abilities. So we need to testify that God exists, and we also need to, in a way, lead all other creatures to that recognition. Which, by the way, as a side note, we know that King David in Psalms talks about Atzei Sadeh imcha ukaf, which means the trees will clap their hands in praise to God. What does that mean? Obviously, we know the trees do not have hands. The idea is that the entire nature, to whatever level, will be able to internalize, to recognize, and to understand that God exists in this universe. So what is וירדו? כי הממשלה והשררה לאדם בברואים בשני חלקיו. Because the position and the mission of being a leader to this universe was given to human being with two parts. בכוח השכל, with the power of the cognitive abilities, לחשוב מחשבות איך ירדה בם, meaning to think, how am I going to what? To rule the nature, but in a sensitive way, in a wise way. ובכוח הגוף, but also with our physical abilities. בתכונת ידו, שנעשו בתכונות נפלאות, לעשות בהם כל מלאכת מחשבת, מה שאין כן בשאר הנבראים. Also, human beings were entrusted not only with the cognitive abilities, but also with, I will call it, more functionality. We know how to, in a way, manage our movements, what to create, also to use, obviously, our cognitive abilities in order to create things with our hands, what other creatures cannot do. ויאמר גם כן, וירדו עליו ועל התולדות העתידות לצאת ממנו, שיהיו יותר צריכים להם ושיאכלו את בשרם. And then the Radak continues, and probably it is not that pleasant for us to listen to that in the 21st century when we are more mindful and more aware of our relationship with nature. But he says, basically back then in the 14th century, he says that we need to know that yes, the creatures around us in a way are there for us and we need even to eat them, to eat their meat, כי עד המבול, because until the flood, לא אכלו בשר. ולא היו צריכים לבהמה ולחיה, אלא למלאכה. It says, until the flood, Adam, Eve, and Cain and Abel, and whoever was there until Noah and the flood, they didn't eat meat. And they used the animals only to ride them and to maybe fly from one place to another. Maybe they took a ride on a dinosaur or something like that. והעוף לביצים ולנוצה, and the birds for the eggs and for the feather. והצאן לחלב ולגיזה, and if there was flock that was for milk, והדגים לא היו צריכים להם אלא מהמבול ואילך. And the fish, they didn't need it because they didn't eat fish or meat, and they needed it only after the flood. אם כן, מה שאמר וירדו בדגת הים, לא אמר אלא על הדורות מהמבול ואילך. So when he says וירדו בדגת הים and they will rule the fish, it was really only after the flood. So what do we have from the Radak? We have, I think, something very interesting. For him, the word וירדו means to lead, but to lead with your cognitive abilities that was a divine gift to you. To also to lead with inventions that we create for our own benefit and for them. The third idea is that they are there for us to eat, to use them in order, not to abuse, God forbid, but to use them for your wants and for your, even somewhat to your desires. And there was also a difference between before the flood and after the flood. So in a way, if we will try to sum up the Radak's opinion, we will say that according to the Radak, I don't want to call it an unlimited unlimited access to nature and to use it, but to some extent, yes, you are their master, you can lead them, you are responsible to lead them so they will recognize, so to speak, God, but at the same time, they are there for you. Rashi in the 11th century in France, says something very interesting, and he quotes one of the statements of our sages. And he says, Ve'yirdu, the word Ve'yirdu, Vav, Yud, Reish, Dalet, Vav, he says, Yesh balashon hazeh leshon ridui ve'leshon yerida, which means, in that language, and that's the beauty of the Hebrew language, sometimes it can be ambivalent, and you can have really two connotations and two interpretations for the same word, one with one connotation and the other one with a totally different connotation that sometimes can even be mutually exclusive. Says Rashi, one understanding or one interpretation for the word ridui means leshon ridui, meaning to master, to have mastery over nature, to be their leader, to be their king, to be their governor, which means you have power over them. On the other hand, the other interpretation, leshon yerida, which means you go down, you descend. How can you understand these two really mutually exclusive interpretations? Says Rashi, Zacha rodeh b'chayot u'b'behemot. Lo zacha na'asa yarud lifnehem ve'hachaya mushelet bo. Which means, if you, meaning human beings, if you merit the merit to rule over nature, you will be able to do it. And if not, the animals will be your masters. Now, what does it mean? In a way, what Rashi is saying, which is very interesting, is that our ability to rule over nature depends on what? Depends on our spiritual level. God entrusted us to lead this nature, to lead all the other creatures. He gave us tremendous gifts. Our ability to think, our ability to express ourselves, our ability to verbal ourselves, our ability to communicate, to create conversations, to create societies, to invent things, to progress this world. Wonderful abilities and wonderful gifts. But they are all connected to Zacha. If you are a truly human being, like God's image, and you pursue kindness and compassion and justice, so then you can use nature. But if not, you need to know that you will be even beneath, under the nature. So I think that Rashi in the 11th century in France is suggesting perhaps a different angle on the idea of we are the rulers over nature. It depends on your spiritual and ethical and moral level. And this correlation between the spiritual level and how we handle the nature obviously is very strong. This correlation means that if you are spiritually elevated and you are more like the image of God, you know you're not going to abuse nature. You might use it, it's there if you need, but you're not going to abuse nature for all kinds of dreams and desires that are not really needed. A totally different angle we find in the Ramban. In the 13th century in Spain, and after that the Ramban moved to Israel, to Tzfat. The Ramban suggests something totally the opposite from Rashi. And he says, Uvechol haaretz, that God appointed us to be masters on the entire universe, in the entire land, shimshelu ba'aretz atzma, which means that they can control the land itself, la'akor, to uproot, lintotz, to destroy, velachpor, to dig, velachtzov, nechoshet barzel, that they can mine copper and metal from the mountains. ולשון רדיעה ממשלת האדון בעבדו. The Ramban makes it very clear. We are the masters, they are the slaves. And you use your slave for whatever you want. This is very, very different than Rashi. Does not talk about any spiritual level. The world was created for us. The creatures were created for us. We are the masters. We can use it the way we want it for our advancement. Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, and now we are moving to the 19th century. Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was in Germany from 1800 to 1880. And so we moved a lot from the Ramban in the 13th century in Spain. And he obviously has a different look, which obviously was encouraged by the society he lived in, the years that passed by, the understanding between human and nature, and so forth. So Rabbi Shimshon Raphael here suggests the following. כל שאר הברואים נזכרו רק בעת בריאתם. All the other creatures that were created in the 6 days of creation were mentioned only when they were created. ואילו האדם נזכר עוד בטרם נברא. However, when God created man, Adam and Eve, he mentioned his creation even before he was created. Like what we read in the verse, Vayomer Elokim, God came up with like an announcement. We are going to create Adam. And then later on he created him. So you can't find something like that with any other of the other creatures. כביכול, so to speak, says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, הבריאה עומדת על עומדה. The entire creation stands still. והבורא מודיע לעולם, and the creator announces in front of everyone, על רצונו לברוא אדם, on his will and desire to create אדם. And אדם זה ישלוט בעולם כשליט וכמנהיג מאת השם. Hashem makes this announcement, I'm about to create Adam. He announces it for all the creation in order to let them know, I am going to create your master. He's going to be my agent, he's going to be my emissary, to be the one who is going to lead all of you. עתה, מכינים את העולם לקראת בוא אדוניו. So now we prepare the world for the grand entry of Adam and Chava. במובן זה, he says, if we understand it like that, יש להבין גם את לשון הרבים של נעשה. He says, by that we can also understand the complicated expression of נעשה, which means we will make Adam, which obviously create theological issues. We know that there is only one God, and not, God forbid, two. הן זו משמעותה המקורית של לשון רבים, המשמשת כלשון של כבוד. מלך בשר ודם מצווה בלשון רבים, רומז בכך על טיב שלטונו. אין הוא מצווה על פי רצונו האישי ולמען טובתו האישית. He says, when we use the word we in plural, does not mean necessarily plural. It's more of a language of majesty, a majestic language. It's a language of kavod, of dignity. It's not, if I'm the king, I will not say I, we will say we. Why? Because I hint by saying we, I basically created a link between me and my people. So I don't speak only on behalf of myself because I'm so smart. I'm speaking on behalf of everyone. So when I make a commandment, I'm not making the commandment only for my own benefit and my own advantage. I'm doing that for you. הוא גוזר גזרות ומתקין תקנות רק לטובת הכלל ושלמה. A true king will not just say, I command you and I take the credit, but rather it's we, it's for us. So that's how Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch also wants to solve the problem and the challenge with the word נעשה. וכן הדבר גם כאן. הבורא מכריז על שלטון האדם, and the same thing applies here, says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. God announces the entry of Adam to this universe, not because God lost interest in the world, not because God wants to be on vacation, but because he really believes that for the benefit of the universe, and because God cares about his creation, he is going to appoint Adam to be the master of the universe. ואכן, and it's true, says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, זה מעמדו של אדם ביחס לבעלי החיים. This is exactly the position of Adam versus the animals and the other creatures. תפקידו איננו להכניע כלה את כולם. He says his position, his role, is not to make them submit themselves to him and to rule in such a violent way, an aggressive way. אולי יש בחינות לארץ וליצוריה המופקעות מתחום שלטוננו. מבחינות אלו הרי הם תכלית לעצמם. This is a very, very strong sentence. And you can see and you can hear the different of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in the 19th century versus Ramban, Radak, and even Rashi, he says, not everything was created for our own benefit, for what we need. Some creatures were created for their own benefit, for their own position, for their own purpose. Their purpose is not only to serve us, and in a way they are exempt from our territory of control. אך תפקידו של אדם לרדות בם, לא אותם. רב שמשון רפאל הירש is very meticulous in the verse, and he says, וירדו פתגת הים ובעוף השמיים לרדות בם, to manage or to lead them. And in English it's a little hard to translate the bam and the otam, which means עליו להפעיל את שלטונו בכל בעלי החיים בהם ובארץ עצמה, בבואו לקיים את תפקידו כאדם ישלול מהם מקצת מחירותם ויביאם לידו חלקית. Which means, he says, when we were appointed to be the leaders of this universe, obviously when you lead and you take control, you take also some of the freedom of the other creatures. In a way, you take it because you're going to tell them what to do. So they are not totally free. So it's bam, meaning some kind of a percentage of their freedom was given to us, but not all. אם ישלוט ביצורים כאדם, and now Rav Shimshon Raphael here says something that I think Rashi already said in the 11th century, as we mentioned before. If you, Adam, if you will rule and if you will lead all the other creatures like Adam, like the same way you were created, בצלם אלוקים ובדמותו, in God's image, ברצון יקבלו את עול שלטונו. So then all the other creatures will willingly accept your burden of mastery. שלטונו אינו שעבוד והשפלה, אלא עילוי להם ושיתופם בחירות האלוקית. Which means his control, meaning Adam's control over the universe, is not for the purpose to humiliate the other creatures or to cause them to submit themselves. This is not the purpose. Rather, we receive that position to lead the other creatures in order to elevate them, in order to uplift them, in order to inspire them to understand God's existence and to allow them to participate in the divine freedom. העולם כולו ייכנע ברצון לאדם הטהור העובד את בורו, which means the entire creature, all the creatures, will willingly accept Adam as their master. And don't forget, Adam was their master because of what? Because he was appointed by God, which means the idea, the divine plan is what? I'm going to place Adam, he is going to manage the world spiritually, ethically, morally. All the creatures will accept him as their leader, and vis-a-vis Adam, they will accept me as their ultimate king. אך אם ינצל האדם את מעמדו לרעה, but if Adam will abuse the power he was given by God, ולא ישלוט ביצורים כאדם כנציג ובא כוח לאל, and he will not lead all the other creatures like a human being in the image of God, אלא בכוחו ובעוצם ידו, but he will do it forcefully, aggressively, לא ברצון ייכנעו לו בעלי החיים. So then, the animals will not submit themselves to him, to Adam, willingly. They probably will submit themselves because Adam is stronger than animals and is smarter than animals. But it will not be willingly, and the purpose will be missed. וכך הורו חכמינו. עת שהוא בצלמנו כדמותנו וירדו, עת שאינו בצלמנו כדמותנו וירדו. He quotes what Rashi brought from the Midrash, that only if we act like the way we were created in God's image, only then we have the merit to inspire the other creatures. And if not, we're going totally to miss the purpose. And we also will lead the entire creation to a terrible challenge in terms of not recognizing God's existence in this world. So according to Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, which I will probably attach to what we saw with Rashi, but it's much more developed in the 19th century, is the idea that, yes, we are the masters of the universe. Yes, we will use nature for our needs, but not necessarily for our desires. Which, by the way, this is really a side note, there is tremendous halachic discussions regarding all sorts of questions regarding this same question that we are talking about it hashkafically, philosophically, but also in Jewish law, which is halacha. And the questions are, can we do experiments in animals? What kind of experiments? What is the level of pain, God forbid, that we can afflict on animals? What are the diseases and the illnesses that justify something like that? So there are so many different questions. What are the benefits and the benefits that we can really derive from animals? What is our responsibility for the other species? What should we do when we see that a species is about to be destroyed from this universe? There are so many halachic questions, very interesting and intriguing questions, that come exactly from our philosophical discussion. So if we put Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch and Rashi together to some extent, and obviously much more elaborated with Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in the 19th century in Germany, the idea of some kind of responsibility and not to take advantage and not to abuse our power vis-a-vis the nature is definitely very clear and very strong. Ramban, Radak, represent a totally different approach that says, no, everything was created for us, you can use it, even at shekale, which means even if you finish it, because you are the master. Now, let's see the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud in Brachot. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav. Rav Yudah says in the name of Rav. Rav was an Amora, almost like a borderline Tana in the 3rd century. He was then in Bavel, in Babylonia. So Rav Yudah says in his name, Asur le'adam sheyochal kodem sheiten ma'achal levehemto. A person should not eat his breakfast, lunch, or dinner before he feeds his animals. Shene'emar, as it says in what we recite in Shema twice a day, V'natati esev besadcha levehemtecha. First, you need to give grass, food, to your animals. V'hadar, and after that, ve'achalta ve'savata. Then, after that, after you fed your animals, then you can eat and drink. What do we see from this halacha? We see something incredible from this halacha. Basically, the Torah states, and Chazal, our rabbis, learned and derived this conclusion from what the Torah says. You need to feed first the animals, and then you eat. We see the sensitivity. We see that in Jewish law, and we will see that in a minute in the Shulchan Aruch, in Rabbi Yosef Karo from the 16th century in Tzfat, in the land of Israel, that the idea is that you first, if you are the master of the universe, if you are the masters of the creatures, if you are the leader, your first interest is the people who you lead. You care first about the animals, and you feed them first. You're not going to sit for a nice breakfast, lunch, or dinner while your animals are starving. You give them food first, and then you eat. And the Shulchan Aruch says in Or HaChaim Ilchot B'tziat Apat, in the laws of how you cut the bread and how do you say hamotzi, he says the following. Yochal miyad, so after you wash your hands, you immediately eat the bread. V'lo yasiach ben bracha la'achila, and you shouldn't speak between the blessing and the eating. Ve'im sach, and if you did speak between the washing of your hands and eating the bread, you need to repeat your bracha, unless the conversation was something about the meal. And he brings few examples, and one of the examples is if he says tunu ma'achal lebehema v'kayotze be'elu ein tzarich levarech. Amazing. If I wash my hands, and after I wash my hands, obviously I cannot speak until I say hamotzi. Let's say before I ate hamotzi, I remembered, oops, I didn't feed my dog, I didn't feed my cow, I didn't feed my lamb. I can speak before I said hamotzi. Hey, I forgot to feed them, bring them food, and then to say hamotzi, and it will not be considered as a break between the two blessings. this is even an elaboration of what we saw before. It's not only that it's nice to feed the animals before you eat. Halachically, it's required. First, make sure that the creatures who depend on you are being fed. If you are their master, you need to lead them. Even if you got some permission to use them, to derive benefits from them, you need to feed them first. And now, we will take a totally different angle from Rav Kook. Rav Kook, from the 20th century, was the chief rabbi of Israel, even before the state was created. He had a vision called Chazon HaTzimchonut, the vision of being vegetarian. And it's very interesting, the beginning of the 20th century, because before it became very fashionable to be a vegetarian or vegan, he already spoke about it. And he spoke about the idea, אין ספק על כל איש משכיל והוגה דעות. He says there is no doubt for everyone who can think that when the Torah says, וירדו בדגת הים, when the Torah appointed us to be the leaders of nature, איננה מכוונת לרדייה של מושל עריץ המתעמר בעמו ועבדיו, רק להפיק חפצו הפרטי ושרירות ליבו. It says no one can think that when God appointed us to lead this nature and to lead the universe, He gave us the permission to aggressively, violently, and to abuse nature. The Ramban and the Radak says that's exactly what the Torah says. But Rav Kook says in the 20th century, no one would think like that. It says, חלילה על חוק עבדות מכוער כזה שיהיה חתום בחותם נצחי בעולמו של השם. It says, God forbid to think like that. Because you really attribute to God something good, God forbid, so cruel, that God will give us permission to abuse nature. חלילה וחס, God forbid. וביותר שכבר העיד התורה, שפעם אחת התאוששה האנושות בכללה, להתנסה מצב המוסר הרם הזה. It says also, in addition, we know that the Torah testified that there was a time that Adam and Chava did not eat meat. That was obviously before the flood and in the time of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Only after שבאו בני נוח, only after Noach came, after the flood, then God gave us permission to eat meat. And therefore, says Rav Kook, we need to think about life without eating meat and with the idea to minimize what we take from nature. So we are not going to discuss being vegetarian or not being vegetarian, being vegan or not being vegan. We're not going to discuss the issue of the halachic issue to eat meat during holidays and Shabbat. But I brought this opinion in order to show how the interpretations progressed and how do we need to see our role as masters of this universe. And we need to always remember, we were created in God's image. We should act like that for ourselves and for the universe. Thank you.